Hi, I'm Ben, and my presentation is on community-led disaster responses in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. To this day, Hurricane Maria is still being referenced, with the most prominent example being during the 2026 Super Bowl halftime show, where Bad Bunny could be seen standing next to broken telephone poles, which served as a symbol back to Puerto Rico and Hurricane Maria. But why exactly is this disaster still being brought into global conversations today? And it's because the impact that it left never fully ended. The National Library of Medicine reports that in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, there was extreme political inequalities, and Puerto Rico was treated differently simply because it was labeled as a territory and not a state. This led to a delay in federal response. So if the government wasn't there and it was absent, who stepped up? And the answer to that is community-led disaster programs. This then raises the question, to what extent were community-led disaster responses in rural Puerto Rican towns after Hurricane Maria effective? First, let's jump into a brief overview of Hurricane Maria. It was a Category 4 storm that hit Puerto Rico in September of 2017, and at the time it was labeled as one of the worst U.S. disasters. It caused extreme widespread damage as the entire island was affected, with roads, homes, and basically any type of infrastructure being destroyed. It would also force communication systems to completely collapse. Furthermore, it was labeled as the longest blackout in U.S. history, as 100% of the island lost power, and in some areas this lasted up to 11 months. Now here's a graph from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that shows the 10 longest blackouts in history. And as you can see, there's Puerto Rico and Hurricane Maria at the top of the list with 1,248 hours of lost electricity. There was also a major human impact as there was over 4,000 deaths, many of these deaths being due to delayed aid, and there was also limited access to essential resources such as food, water, and healthcare. The U.S. Government Accountability Office reports on the challenges in government response and states that in some areas, recovery took over 5 years, with many of the delays being due to bureaucracy and funding issues. They also state that there was difficulty distributing resources across the entire island. Amanda Brinton, a researcher at the University of Florida who specializes in natural resources, reports on the environmental impacts, stating that there was many fallen trees and vegetation. She also states that there was scattered trash across the entire island. Luckily though, many locals came together and formed nonprofit organizations after the storm, and cleanup began immediately by them. As a 2018 article by Isabel Beltran, published by 100 Resilient Cities, states that when locals came together after Hurricane Maria, their chances of survival increased greatly. Stimulus Source B builds on this idea by talking about how social connection can positively impact your mental health and future success. Therefore, it is no mistake that when locals came together to form nonprofit organizations, they made great progress. This is not a unique idea though, as Daniel P. Aldridge, a researcher at Purdue University, found in a 2011 study that individuals relied heavily on informal networks during the Kobe earthquake that was mentioned in Stimulus Source D, A Walk to Kobe. This brings me to the conclusion that yes, community responses were very strong, but only to a certain extent, as communities do not have the power or resources that federal corporations have. Charlie Wilson, a researcher at the University of Michigan, found in a 2019 study that Hurricanes Irma and Harvey actually had a faster federal response when being compared to Hurricane Maria. Now here's a graph from the NRDC that shows the amount of federal staff that was deployed during Hurricanes Maria, Irma, and Harvey. And as you can see, Hurricane Maria received the least amount of federal staff with only 2,805 members. This is strange though, as when we look at a graph from the United States Geological Survey, we can see that Hurricane Maria actually caused more damage than Hurricane Irma. Therefore, it would make sense that they received more federal staff, but obviously that was not the case. This brings me to the conclusion that communities have a fast and immediate response, while governments have many resources, but a slow and sometimes politically biased response. So how can governments respond faster and more effectively to natural disasters? Let's look at the current solutions and what is being done right now. One of the main solutions right now is pre-positioning resources. And this is when the government stocks supplies before the disaster hits and prioritizes the highest risk areas by putting teams in those areas. The pros of this is that it allows for more resources to be available, and it allows for a faster immediate response, as well as saving lives early. The cons is that it has funding delays due to politics, and money does not always mean a faster response. Furthermore, it's very expensive to maintain. Another solution is state-to-state mutual aid. This is when states send help, such as workers or supplies, to other states during the times of emergency. The pros of this is that it allows you to share resources quickly across states, and it helps when one state is incredibly overwhelmed. The cons is that the coordination and paperwork allows for a slow response, and the system can temporarily fail if funding lapses. Now on to my solution, which is Independent Disaster Response Authority. This would automatically deploy aid after disasters, and it would use data to look at what areas are going to be hit the hardest, and then it would place workers in those areas. Furthermore, it would work alongside the Federal Emergency Management Association, but it would be faster and less politically biased. The pros is that it would be faster, as I stated, and have less political delays, and it would give more equal treatment to all areas. For the cons is that it's expensive to maintain and would have less direct government control. Also, there's an extreme risk of mismanagement if the wrong person gets their hands on the corporation. So what? Why is it important that the government can respond quickly and effectively to natural disasters? And it's important because in the aftermath of any disaster, lives are on the line. And if the government has no sense of urgency or is politically biased, then those lives can be lost. The government also has the ability to prevent much chaos and confusion, which can negatively harm a community. Furthermore, they can stop long-term negative environmental impacts. Thank you, and here's my works cited.
Thank you. That was 6 minutes and 13 seconds.
Okay.
And now for your oral defense.
Yep.
Did your research go in a different direction than you originally expected?
Thank you for your question. Yes, my research did go in a different direction than I originally intended because at first I was just focused on whether community responses were strong or or if they weren't. And then I found that they were strong, but only to a certain extent. So it forced me to take a political direction because I wanted to see how much politics weighed in on this to see it, like obviously I said the government had a delayed response. So yeah, my research went more politically than I assumed.
Okay, thank you very much. And secondly, how is your conclusion in conversation with the body of literature or other research sources you examined?
My conclusion is in the body of literature or other resources that I examined because I believe that the response should not be politically biased, and that's what other things think.
Okay, thank you very much.